Hi guys, and welcome to another lesson. And today we're going to look at the basic editing toolset within Pro Tools. So let's begin. Here we have another Pro Tools session open. As usual, we've got all of our tools on the top section here. Now what I've done on this is I've clicked and I've selected to show all. And this way I've got the full suite of tools available. We previously looked at the edit settings, and today we're going to quickly look at the zoom controls and the tool set. So this selection over here is to control the way that we zoom in to the arrange page on Pro Tools. If I click this button, you can see how that we zoom out, and if I click on the right hand side we zoom in. Alternatively, you can click and drag right or drag left. I'm clicking and holding down a right click and dragging left and right for smooth zooming. Over here we have a waveform zoom. If I click, you can see the waveform is getting bigger, or clicking at the bottom to get smaller. Again, I can click and drag for a smooth experience. Okay, let me remove this selection here quickly. Now, it's important to note that we are not increasing the volume. This is not doing clip gain. This is merely a visual zoom. Okay, and over here I have a MIDI track, and this MIDI will work the same way. Increasing, decreasing size, or click and drag for a smooth zoom. Finally, we have 5 zoom levels presets. If I place my cursor over here and we go to preset 1, it is reasonably well zoomed in, and as we go up the presets, we're going to see that the zoom level gets more and more focused. Okay, let's get back to the full project. Here we have our tool set. F5 is the shortcut for the magnifying tool. The magnifying tool, if you right click over it, gives you 2 options: normal zoom or single zoom. With normal zoom, when you come over a piece, a clip, you can select a box and that will fill the screen with that selection. You will then stay on the magnifying tool to do another selection. It is quite rare that you would actually want to zoom several times in a row the way I'm zooming here. It is more likely that you would be editing, for example, perhaps you are doing some MIDI drawing and decide that you want to zoom into a section and get back to editing. And that is where, if I right click, single zoom comes into play. Again, F5 will switch between them. Single zoom means that if I was on a tool, I choose single zoom, F5, I draw my range that I want to zoom into. It zooms and straight away puts me back on the tool that I want. Let's move on. These 3 tools together form what is called a smart tool. If I click on the top, you see I've selected all 3 of them, or I can individually select them. When they are selected in the individual capacity, they have slightly additional function. At least the trim tool and the grabber tool do. If we select them together, their functionality varies slightly and they become a smart or multi-tool. As you can see, the first tool, the trim tool, if I right click, gives me options over here. So let's look at the first standard option. As I go over a waveform, you can see that I've become 2 brackets, and when I cross the middle point of the waveform, the bracket changes the direction it's facing. This is the default behavior of the trim tool. If I want to trim, crop from the left inwards, anywhere up to the middle point, I can simply click anywhere on the waveform, and it will click there. Once I cross, now the middle point has changed, and once I come here, I can trim like that. Now the middle point will be about here. So you can see how it's changing. If I wanted to trim the left, but at this point, I can push Alt, and Alt will swap the cursor around. Sorry, undo. I didn't hold Alt down there. So there we go. So the trimmer tool works in that way. That is your basic trimmer tool. I'm right clicking and selecting TCE. This is time stretching. So now if we have a listen to the tempo of the song. Okay. If I was to grab the track and squash it, trim it shorter like this, I'm essentially I have a fade in there that I've forgotten about. Let's just quickly zoom in and get rid of it. So back to the operation I'm trying to perform. Again, let's listen to that chorus. Well, we've heard it. This is it. Now I'm going to stretch the track. I'm compressing it, so it actually should be making it smaller, therefore faster. So we'll hear the tempo of the song has now changed. If I undo, alternatively I could have stretched it longer, and this will then drag things out, make them slower. It's important to note that the pitch is not changing. Pro Tools is speeding up and slowing down without varying the pitch. Alright. Finally, on the trim tool, we have a loop section. If I now use this to drag out, I'll be repeating that audio. And the more I drag it out, the more repeats we get. That's the trim tool. Next we have the selection tool. This one is pretty easy. Whatever I select is highlighted, and whatever is highlighted can be deleted. Okay. Next up we have the grabber tool. So the shortcuts for these three tools are F5 is magnifying. We're talking about F6, F7 and F8 for these three. The grabber tool has got three options. If we look at time, it just means I am moving an item on the timeline. The separation option is only going to come into play when we actually use the smart tool. And finally, the object selection allows me to draw a lasso style box over a bunch of items to select them. So let's look at the smart tool. We said F6, F7, F8. To enable the smart tool, I can click on the top bracket, or I can simply push F6 and F7 together, or F7 and F8 together, or F6 and F8 together. Any combination of two of these shortcuts will enable the smart tool. When we're in the smart tool, the way it works is when you move to the end of a clip, I'm going to just switch to standard trimming. When you reach the end of a clip, you see the bracket form, and you can then trim. So now you would be trimming not from anywhere within the waveform, but from the end. Okay, and the front end, same thing. So trimming happens at the edges. Fades happen at the top left-hand corner. You get this icon here, and we can fade like this, and fade there. All right. At the top half of the waveform, the upper half, we become the selection tool. The bottom half becomes the grabber. And if I was to have two sections like this, and I come to the bottom half over two overlapping pieces, I can become the crossfade tool. And that is creating a fade out and a fade in. And that is, in a nutshell, the smart tool. Very, very useful. Finally, I said we need to look at the separation section of the smart tool. So have a look here. If I was to highlight in the smart tool, now I have that piece. If I try click, I suddenly grab the entire block that it's connected to. If I wanted to switch to the separation tool and try the same thing, you'll see that I can now grab just that block. This is a great way to select, if I'm holding Alt, a range that you want to copy. So if I wanted to grab this piece and copy it earlier, I can Alt and drag and drop, and this way I've copied a selection without having to cut the waveform itself. Next up, we have the scrub icon. This will play, and it'll play in either direction. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking with the mouse and dragging left or right. And finally, we have the pencil tool, and this gives us many options. With regard to the waveform, the only time I would use the pencil tool on the actual waveform is if I needed to draw on the waveform itself and perhaps fix up. Now that would create a bit of noise, obviously. You can make it even worse. Let's be extreme. we're going to be creating some sort of click sound here. Now, we wouldn't really ever want to do that. You can see what I've made there. All right, I'll undo that. But it might be the opposite scenario where a recording has a small or some sort of sound on it that you could go in with the pencil tool and remove. The other use for the pencil tool will be more than likely when you're doing your automation. And that covers our tool set. We will be looking at automation. Of course, when you click down here, sorry, let's just quickly mention, you do have options for the pencil tool. So we're normally in freehand. Okay, the shortcut being F10 will switch through your pencil tool options, and you can see the different shapes that you can draw. So if I was to choose a line, I can now draw smooth volume curves and so on. There's options here. The triangle and the square will create various other shapes, especially when we're drawing on open spaces. That covers this lesson for now, guys. I hope that it does make sense to you all. I hope that you have a good time practicing with these tool sets and that Pro Tools becomes more familiar. We'll be chatting soon. All the best. Cheers.